trillions in expanding their base. And obviously the thing is, with Saudi Arabia, they have a voluntary extra cut of 1 million barrels a day. They will probably destined to run out at the end of this month or next month, and they will probably, extend that into certainly the first quarter. But essentially, when you look at it, the oil market has been functioning on the shoulders of the Saudi cut, of the Saudi extra cut.
You use that phrase, telling us where the global economy is. It's telling us that there could well be weaker demand next year.
Absolutely. And you look at it, OPEC says there is 2.2 million barrels a day demand increase. The IEA says it's 930,000. So there is disagreement. And when I look at the state of the economy, the state of interest rates, I'm very concerned. Look at it. The engine of growth, or the engine of Europe, Germany, is in recession. So we're not doing too well on the global scale. You look at the real estate sector in China, we're not doing too well.
Energy expert at Meyer Resources, and just a very quick one with brokers. We talked about this company a lot on the programme. The British Bank, Metro Bank, are announcing a layoff of 20% of its headcount, part of its cost-cutting measures with the bank. It's very much functions around.
Well, thank you very much indeed. 2 minutes past 7. The temporary truce between Israel and Hamas has been extended for a 7th day. The Israeli government has perhaps another right to decide how and when to resume its campaign to eliminate Hamas. In the face of mounting international pressure to do more to protect the civilian population of Gaza and to allow in more aid. Let's talk to Anshel Pfeffer, journalist for the Haaretz newspaper in Israel and of the Economist as well. Good morning to you. It's quite a decision that Netanyahu and crucially that divided coalition of his now faces.
Good morning, Nick. It's not just Netanyahu, as you said, it's Israeli war cabinet of Netanyahu. He's not he is the prime minister, but he's not really calling the shots on his own. I think he's rather dithering when it comes to his own personal decisions. The war cabinet agreed just a few hours ago to extend the truce for 24 more hours after Hamas came up with a list which wasn't exactly satisfying Israel's demands, but because last night 2 extra hostages were released beyond the 10 hostages that Israel agreed upon Hamas. It was a gesture to Putin that since they were Russian-Israeli citizens, Israel agreed at the last moment that they would also be counted towards today's list. So today's list of hostages, who are expected to be released this evening, are 8. There's 6 women and 2 minors on the list.
Now, the conventional wisdom is that the longer the pause in the fighting continues, the harder it is for the Israeli Defense Force to resume the fighting. Is that right?
Well, that you said is the conventional wisdom. The IDF is poised to resume its campaign in Gaza. Many of the soldiers were given a short leave over the last week of truce, but they're now almost all them back and prepared to continue the fighting. The IDF has already submitted its operational plans that have been authorized by the government. The real question now is, will there be another extension of the truce? Today's extension is just for today. Ends officially tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And unless Hamas comes up with more hostages who are in the category of the deal which was agreed upon, which is women and children, and they now seem to be saying that they've run out of those hostages that Israel believes that at least about 20 more held in Gaza who would be in that category. But unless some of those names are presented tonight, enough of them for another day of truce, we could well be back in fighting.
And if we are, actually, do you think Netanyahu and his cabinet are listening to President Biden when he says you cannot attack the south of Gaza in a way that you have the war, you have to protect civilian life more, you have to allow more aid in?
I think they are, and I think that even before the surges, President both Biden himself on the phone to Netanyahu and Antony Blinken, the state secretary, is this morning in Israel, meeting in person with Netanyahu and the war cabinet. Even before that, we were hearing from Israeli journalists that they know that the southern stage, the second stage of this, will be very different because Glasgow, and there were over 2 million people crowded into the south because of the different nature of the fighting there. It's not the same kind of target that Gaza City was, one big city, one suburb. Here you're talking about smaller towns and refugee camps, which they'll probably approach in a more staged manner with smaller level of forces than we saw. So you already have these operational circumstances. Add to that the urgence from the Biden administration, and we will be looking what will probably be a different type of campaign in the second stage if all of it takes place.
And Sheffield, correcting the conversation jokes. 26 minutes past 7 in Gary's here in the sports. Good morning to you. A grim night for Manchester United. They're in danger of being eliminated from the Champions League. They drew 3-3 with Galatasaray, having been 2-0 and then 3-1 up. Goalkeeper Andre Onana made 2 very careless mistakes. United manager Erik ten Hag was diplomatic when he was asked about the keeper.
It's not about me individual. Of course, individual people, some individual errors can make difference. Take responsibility for it, but it's always about team. This team is good. All the players in the squad are good. We deserve the best to play for Man United because they are brilliant players. That counts for the whole squad.
The BBC's Simon Stone, who covers United affairs, joins us. Simon, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, he was diplomatic about his goalkeeper. Do you think deep down he might regret a little bit not keeping David De Gea, previous keeper?
I'm not sure about that, but what I think is that he's been affected by injuries, and that means that the positives of Andre Onana, playing with the ball at his feet and passing, have not been seen to full effect, and now all we're getting is the mistakes. And we got 2 last night, both from Hakim Ziyech, 3 kicks. The second one in particular was poor, and that now leaves Manchester United in a very tricky position because basically they're going to have to win their final game at home against Bayern Munich and hope that Galatasaray draw their final game against FC Copenhagen. And that's the only way that they're going to get through. They may not even qualify for the Europa League.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you make. It has big financial implications. What's the latest on Sir Jim Ratcliffe's proposed investment? I wonder what he thinks when he sees results like last night.
Well, I don't think he can be too impressed. The latest, I think, is that we'll get some resolution over Jim Ratcliffe taking 25% of the club, maybe next week now. But just by not qualifying for the last 16, Manchester United will miss out on over £8 million each win, and they've only had one in the group stage, £2 million. So there is an effect on the bottom line, even if ultimately it won't affect Jim Ratcliffe's desire to pick for the Manchester United. Maybe it just strengthens it because one of the leading strong situations.
Sunday Stone, thank you. Arsenal are in the lead for the Champions League. They finished losing 6-0. Leicester's lead at the top of the Championship is down to a point on Sheffield Wednesday. Ipswich in second spot, Millwall 3-1. Liverpool rugby captain Owen Farrell made himself unavailable to next year's Six Nations Championship. He's taken the decision to prioritise his and his family's mental well-being. Chris Jones reports.
Farrell ended the recent Rugby World Cup by reminding everyone of his incurable quality, breaking the England points record and leading the side to a commendable third-place finish. But for whatever reason, whether to do with his steely persona or a compromising on-pitch attitude, Farrell has often formed the front of improvement in certain sections of the public, especially outside England. This off on the pitch suggested he was struggling, but by taking a break from international duty to protect his and his family's well-being, it's a sobering reminder that under the surface, even the most mentally resilient and unflinching of athletes can be vulnerable.
Here are the tips: 1 for Taunton, 235, number 5, Omoso, Exeter 245, number 1, Magnussen.
Morning. One of the big cinematic hits was Christopher Nolan's blockbuster Oppenheimer. Emily Blunt is taking to about her role in City. Heritage on the actors' strike and how she believes acting helped her work through her stamina. Also, Ireland's first ever female state pathologist, Dr. Marie Cassidy, joins me. She's a great job of counting the case, the child buildings in the supply chain. And how much is the playing for a long relationship and a short marriage? We'll be discussing why this happens and things that happen across the journalists.
Quick look at the weather. Sun in the northeast today, right up there.
Texas calls for this morning. 29 minutes to listening to today.
Henry Kissinger, who shared some of the most foundational policies of the Cold War, has done it. Under President Ford, he has worked to re-engage with China and to support the Soviet Union. When he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973, his war continued his work shared a tweet considered from some to be anti-Semitic. Apologised, but then expletively an outburst from event in New York last night, accusing the companies of blackmail. The former health secretary Michael returned his record during the pandemic, and he appears before the COVID inquiry today. It already emerged during the hearings that the company's most senior civil servant at the time, Mr. Hancock, should have been sacked.
Jay, thank you very much indeed. It is 27 minutes to 8. BBC News, the division of the BBC in which this programme sits, announced substantial changes yesterday to the programmes and services that are consumed by millions of people around the world. The changes are driven by the BBC's need to save £500 and are very urgent to persuade younger viewers and listeners to pay for a licence in an era of ferocious competition. Among the changes, new investigative and reporting roles, expansion of BBC's Verify service, and dominating headlines on the story this morning, radical changes to Newsnight, which is becoming legislation. Deborah Turness is the CEO of BBC News and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with Newsnight. At a time when our public domain has an acute shortage of original reporting and its infinite supply of chat, why are you cutting the original reporting and increasing the chat?
You've just outlined some of the measures we announced yesterday, and I'd like to take a step back and explain the big picture of what we're doing when Newsnight gets into that. This is all about getting the very best of the BBC's brilliant journalism to the maximum number of consumers and getting the maximum return on investment. As our audience shifts from broadcast to digital, like every other business, the BBC has to operate with its budgets. That budget is now 500 million less than it used to be, so that licensing settlement and the impacts of high inflation. And BBC News must carry a share, as the rest of the organisation does too. Newsnight is a really powerful programme that creates amazing investigations in journalism, but it's reaching 300,000 people on BBC Two at 10:30. And what we are doing here is responding to what the audience tells us they value most about Newsnight and pulling in investment and effort into that high quality journalism to the centre of the organisation, where it can actually reach audiences across all of our platforms to deliver a better return on investment. And the audience at Newsnight are telling us they value most the consequential conversation, debate and interview.
Isn't the problem with that analysis that there's no real evidence that if you put the investigations into some sense of unit, you still get as good investigations? Emily Maitlis said that the Prince Andrew interview simply wouldn't happen with this new iteration of the programme, just people come to flagship news programmes at schools, they don't come to debate shows. Next week, the 6 Metropolitan Police officers can be sentenced for sending racist WhatsApp messages. That follows an investigation by Simon Contecha. Newsnight's investigation into the Tavistock clinic was instrumental in triggering an independent review of its services. And you're jettisoning that because you're confident that it will still happen through some centralised pot elsewhere. Where's the evidence that it will still happen?
Two things. We're doing the opposite of jettisoning. We're actually going to be pulling that kind of journalism to the core of BBC organisation so that it can then be distributed across all of our platforms.
Those scoops go to programmes. Well, those scoops go to programmes. Is the evidence of your company, very successful career for the past 20 years in media, that the way you get scoops is through hungry, competitive specialist producers and reporters on programmes and not via a kind of amorphous sludge of some vast content?
So I think you can actually see the impact of having invested in investigations at the Central Agencies. Just this week, Justin Rowlett exposed the UAE using COP to do oil deals. We've had BBC verifying BBC Arabic obtain videos that showed that Hamas were training the October 7th attacks 3 years ago under the noses of the Israelis. Last night, Newsnight broke a really strong investigation about the NHS, continuing their whistleblower series. It has not appeared on this programme at all. That's because it's sitting in a unit which is at the edge of BBC News, not at the centre. We need to pull that journalism, that effort, that talent, that endeavour to the core, and just as we've done with many other investigations in recent past, proving that we do deliver information on our platforms, enhance it, and support it. Another big story that I would name is a very successful treatment was the release of the 6 suspects in the workplace. That was a huge investigation of half the organisation to roll down across our whole organisation as a documentary on digital and
Instead, you ended up with a halfway house of sex.
I love that question because actually what we did was listen to the audience, which is what we must do. We are a licensed funded organisation and we listen to our audience. Now there are some quite well-known commentators in civil media who said that these people have actually taken Switzerland by put out of Europe. We listened to our audience who said, we value Newsnight as a brand, we value it where it is initially, but what we really recognise it for, what we most use it for at that time of the day, is for added value conversation, concentrated interest and motivation. It's high fibre, premium, easy conversation and access. And that's what we do well. They don't actually use Newsnight credits for the investigative content. They actually also find it opposite and sometimes even big news data coming to Newsnight, finding similar content that they could have seen on the digital. So we are finding ways in preserving and protecting the Newsnight brand and in repositioning the future. And let's think about this. Many people on the ministry say like Newsnight. This is a discerning audience and they are looking to add value, but they're listening to podcasts, their habits have changed. And this is an opportunity to actually adapt and evolve the Newsnight offer to match where the audience is now going.
One of the big lessons from all the issues of social media is trust is collapsing as an adult. Making decisions why should you trust in this organization?
I think we live in a polarised society. Social media, information, sometimes provided by Western states, sometimes provided by splits communities in society. And we are, again, hearing from our audience. We've done a lot of work with audience to understand how we can build trust with this multi-county environment. And our audience has been really clear about what they want to us. They need clarity in the chaos. They need us to work hard to see people account to account. They want fairness and respect. Fairness, voices should be heard with a name, respect. They want to feel they have a hand in what the BBC does and delivers, and that we are inclusive and that we're responsive to them. But most of all, what they're asking for, all of that, is transparency. To trust us, they must know more about the work we do. We have to pull back the curtain, the work we do and show our work, and that's why we have recently launched BBC Verify, which is already gaining real traction and recognition out there, and we're investing in that as part of these measures.
There is also an accuracy, of course. Do you think that this war in the Middle East has damaged trust?
I think that this is a very difficult story to
Has it
cover.
damaged trust in the BBC?
That is for our audience inside.
What do you think?
Well, we've done research that shows that BBC is way out front in terms of being the most trusted organisation for impartial coverage of this conflict. So we are doing a better job than others, and we are proud of that, but we are never satisfied. And I would say that it is a very complex and difficult story, and that we are carefully and thoughtfully navigating our way through it. And our audience are telling us that we are doing a good job.
CEO of BBC News. It is coming to BBC News today. Let's take 21 morning papers. That conflict in the Middle East still dominates many front pages with the closing down of the Paul Coffey in the Daily Telegraph writes interestingly about how the hostage table is working for Hamas in a way that few believe or not 27. Huey says Norway has already the fact that on the day that they have. The Israeli government, he writes, is running to its cost. Even when we have one of the world's most effective military forces, it is still possible to conclude that achieving key objective by some unforeseen circumstance. In this case, the power of emotional blackmail. And there's quite a lot written about the COP summit. We'll be talking a lot more about that in time, I've no doubt. One striking piece in the Guardian from Christiana Figueres, the architect of the Paris Climate. He says she makes a conscious effort not to fall into what's called the dark rabbit hole. Waking up each morning looking for the the plummeting cost of renewable energy. The time now is
17 minutes to 8.
a check tablecloth, a wine list, food served under a silver cloth. Welcome to Greggs. Yes, you heard right. Greggs, your favourite neighbourhood bakery, have a new Parisian themed restaurant opening in Newcastle, serving beef Wellington made from steak bakes. And it's first made from caramel slices. Of course, Harry of the Times. Tomorrow, Greggs are up to. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning.
Have you had a chance to taste what patrons see the plan?
I was invited to the EIPO. Sadly, I couldn't make it up to Newcastle. It's a great shame. I'm a big fan of Greggs, and it's very clean marketing. It seems to every year do something more spectacular and bring in the crowds and prove that they are more than maybe bakeries. Sadly, they no longer sell sliced bread. It is a great shame. But they sell over 1 million sausage rolls every single day. They're Britain's favourite lunchtime snack.
So clearly part of this is just getting you and me to talk to each other on the radio and utilise that all the time. But there actually is a place where you can have this vegetable pasta.
Yeah, it's a very popular thing now amongst retail and consumer brands to do a pop-up and get all the influencers along to do TikToks, Instagram reels, and they're often very shallow, inauthentic. They're there for 24 hours, 48 hours at the most. Realistically, the public can't actually enjoy them. In this case, actually, Greggs have tied up with another big Newcastle main Fenwich department store, and it is open. This is a real thing. It is open every day, all day long, throughout December. It is open in December, but who knows if it's very popular. It's possible it might be opened elsewhere.
So my favourite is the Jamie Fizz cocktail, inspired by Jam Davis. It's part of what works to create a level themselves.
Yes, I think there's a terrible term called banter marketing. It's the likes of Paddy Power, of Virgin. I think Richard Branson in some ways pioneered it. It's Mickey taking, it's very self-knowing, and Greggs is very big on social media. But it works because the message is very clear. And in this case, this is proven that Action Growth is now open in the evening, and it's very competitive out there. They're trying to fight. There's a phrase, share of stomach, that the food industry uses. They're fighting Deliveroo, Just Eat, and the supermarkets for hot food in the evening, and people are feeling the pinch. And Greggs does sell hot food in the evening, so what better way to kind of highlight this kind of fun, silly stunt than open a Parisian bistro?
More of your conversation from an hour. Share the stomach, carry on, get yourself on a treat.
It is 14 straight, and it is time for the speaking to Christopher Hunt, member of Tree Runner. Good morning. In 2002, the World Academy presented an exhibition of 35 ancient Buddha images being unearthed in China. They were exquisitely beautiful, with slender androgynous torsos of children and nymphs. The exhibition ends with dancing, and the figures picked out by spotlights. Looking at them, you felt you'd entered a sublime tranquil realm. This latest job in Greece and the Department for Arabian Markets returned, so thinking about the pictures and seeing those harmony brothers and equal experience in museums. For me, a Buddha image is the outward expression of a dimension that can only be accessed by opening your mind to devotion or meditation. Its purpose is to evoke wisdom, compassion, or transformative energy. They also be a work of art and offer insights into the culture that produced it. For Buddhists, a Buddha image is above all a sacred object, whose natural home is a shrine or a temple. Imagine other faith traditions would say something similar about their artifacts. Now I'm sure that curators would say that the exhibits in their collections are fine where they are. For me, situating sacred objects within the secular space of a museum or gallery changes everything. Some objects survive their displacement. You stand in Amitabha figure and cross or enter the British Museum in Russell Square as gravity and grace are somehow enhanced by the stairwell winding around it. In museum spacious Asian art galleries, other objects can be branded on a plinth or cut off behind glass. The loss of the context that gave an object its meaning is often an argument for returning them to their places of origin. Alongside that discussion, I'd love to see museums and galleries displaying objects in ways that fit their meaning within the faiths that produced them. It might be hard to create a temple in a gallery. And museums would look very different if they were conceived as contemplative spaces where people of all faiths and minds can absorb themselves in the deeper meaning of the works on display. When I visit the National Gallery in London, I always try to see Leonardo da Vinci's cartoon of the Virgin and Child. The work itself is ethereally beautiful. What makes it special is its set apart, sheltered space away from damaging daylight, inadvertent shrine, a place of communion. That was thought for the day with Vishva Pani, a member of the Tree Runner. Time now, 11 minutes.
What we're not sure of Rishi Sunak doing now about the record levels of illegal migration into Britain. He's been taunted by Keir Starmer for losing control of our borders, called by his own MPs that he faces a coup or throwing motives if he fails to act, and publicly warned in the House of Commons on his own immigration policy what the Pacific talk. So at the Prime Minister's dilemma, he got choice to cut the numbers coverage. He's being resisted by those whose businesses and public services say they need workers coming from abroad and will struggle without it. Let's just examine that. With the one who runs the National Care Association Executive Chair, at least Margaret Ahmed, and would be Johnson, the former chairman of the Future Express Joe, regards and Channel 4. Good morning to you. Good morning. What would it mean for you, Dr. Ahmed, if the government were to say, that's it, we're turning off the tap, and care workers can come from abroad? The government could put on a stop around 30 people.
tried really hard to get the domestic workforce to see social care as a career, but with posted it every thought, we've not been able to work with we've already been in place for decades, we've been trying, we've not been able to get investment in social care to create that.
We heard evidence from 4 scientists and health officials last week. We talked about it here in the programme, and all 4 said that first lockdown in March 2020 should have been imposed earlier. Sir Patrick Vallance, the former chief scientific advisor to the government, said about a week earlier. Mr Gove, who I think was a voice urging more caution than some other ministers back in 2020, again sort of repeated that argument and agreed that the first lockdown he felt should have been earlier, but he also said other mistakes had been made. For example, he felt not giving enough attention to the impact of some of those restrictions on children and young people in particular.
And yesterday we heard evidence from Professor Dame Jenny Harries. She was the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for England at the time and now runs the UK Health Security Agency. And she was asked about advice on face masks early in the pandemic, and here's what she said.
The issue for me at that time, and I think Professor Van Sam shared it, was we definitely shouldn't be supporting something which was not evidence-based if it was going to promote a risk compensation. The anxiety was that if people just thought they could get a bit of t-shirt, put it around their face, and that would solve all the problems and we could go back to normal, that was not going to be a good public health intent.
So, Jim, yet another very divisive subject, face masks during the pandemic. But can you explain what was going on in that exchange?
So in that exchange, they're talking specifically about draft guidance that was being drawn up in May 2020. And it's guidance on how to make and wear your own masks. So these are cloth face coverings rather than anything too sophisticated. And Professor Harries is making comments on that guidance at the time and suggesting that masks like that were in some cases ineffective. And the point that she is making, I think, is that to begin with, it's very difficult to design a real-world study, and we've talked about this in the programme, that can accurately measure the effectiveness of masks in a situation like a pandemic. And her concern was, without that evidence base there was a danger that by recommending masks, or by following through with this guidance, it could give a false sense of security to some people, and there could be more mixing as a result because people felt that they had some extra protection against the virus.
So what's coming up next in the inquiry?
Well, today we're hearing from evidence from Matt Hancock, who of course was England's Health Secretary at the time. That's going to run through until tomorrow as well. And then next week we just learned that Boris Johnson will be giving evidence on Wednesday and Thursday next week, as this part of the inquiry really comes to a close. So a very significant week next week for Mr Johnson and for the country in general.
Okay, Jim, you're going to be very busy and we'll let you get back to it. And can I recommend the COVID Inquiry podcast, where Jim really gets into the details on all things related to the inquiry into the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Monica.
That's it for this week. Next week, Vagrant Birds with Victoria Gill. From me, goodbye.
BBC Inside Science was presented by Marnie Chesterton and it was produced in Cardiff by Hannah Robbins. It was a BBC Wales and West production and it was made in collaboration with Open University. And from science in the here and now to a glimpse of science fiction in the future. On BBC iPlayer.
Now, where we are.
Did you just get a cold?
No.
Doctor, you can get the TARDIS back, can't you? Use the Sonic.
The TARDIS is in danger, it goes away, and it only comes back once the danger is gone.
There's something that's so bad the TARDIS ran away.
Yes.
What are they? Their time has come. Doctor Who continues on Saturday on BBC iPlayer. And if you can't wait for your Doctor Who fix, on BBC Sounds right now you can find the comedian Toby Haydock's live take on the ups and downs of the Doctor Who fan. That's in Survival Doctor Who on OCZ. This is Radio 4, it's 5 o'clock and that means it's time for PM with Evan Davis.
Darling, the Chancellor who steered the UK through the most difficult days of the financial crisis, has died. We have tributes from his political allies and his opponents.
You want and expect your opponents to play at a high level. And that's better for everybody. And Alistair played the game of politics at that level, and I think that was better for the debate for it. You don't want arguments that are conducted at a lower base level. The Scottish referendum was conducted at a very high level.
Well, it's been a busy news day. Also on the programme, the first day of COP28. It starts with a warning that 2023 is set to become the hottest year in human history.
Record global heating sends shivers down the spines of world leaders.
We'll hear from the COP in due time. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's been in front of the COVID inquiry, challenged on his claim that he called for a lockdown 10 days earlier than it actually happened. And is this the best football player in the world?
His first international goal.
Well, there is increasing buzz around the performance of a young English star. We'll tell you who and why. But we'll start with the BBC News, read today by Alice.
The former Labour Chancellor Alistair Darling has been remembered for his calmness in the crisis and his wry good humour following his death at the age of 70. He was an MP for almost 3 decades and a minister for 13 years under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Lord Darling also led the Better Together campaign against Scottish independence ahead of the referendum in 2014. Mr Brown says his wisdom helped steer the country through the global financial crisis in 2008.
He had to deal at very first hand with the collapse of the banks. He had to deal with the international ramifications of the crisis by talking to finance ministers across the world, and I think he gained the respect of people internationally as well as nationally for the way that he handled the difficulties that were a hard time for people, but something that we came through partly as a result of the tremendous work that he has actually done.
The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has told the COVID inquiry that thousands of lives could have been saved if the first lockdown at the end of March 2020 was imposed 3 weeks earlier. Mr Hancock also said there was a toxic culture in Downing Street at the time and denied claims made by other witnesses that he'd lied to colleagues. Our correspondent Ellie Price has spent the day with the inquiry.
Matt Hancock told the inquiry the UK had really cracked it and lockdown being called on March the 2nd, 2020, 3 weeks earlier than it was. He said the virus would have killed fewer than a tenth of the number of people who died in the first wave. The former Health Secretary also told the inquiry his department had tried to wake up Whitehall to the severity of the virus in the early part of the pandemic. He said the response should have been led from the centre of government earlier.
Rail workers belonging to the RMT union have voted to accept a pay deal offered by 14 train companies, ending a long-running series of strikes. The deal includes a backdated pay rise of 5% as well as job security guarantees. It means RMT members won't be involved in industrial action until at least the spring of next year. However, train drivers represented by the union ASLEF will carry on with their strikes. The big annual UN conference on combating climate change has opened in the United Arab Emirates with a deal to hand out money to developing countries hit by disasters linked to global warming. First payments will be made from a fund known as Loss and Damage, following a 30-year campaign by poorer governments. The head of the COP28 talks, Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber, said the agreement sent a positive signal of momentum ahead of tough negotiations on cutting carbon emissions.
The next 2 weeks will not be easy. Let's remember, our task is not only about negotiating text or putting words on paper. It is about improving lives. It is about people.
Hamas has released 2 more Israeli hostages as a temporary truce in Gaza continues for a 7th day. It's not clear why the 2 women, both dual nationals, were freed before a group of between 6 and 8 others whose arrival in Israel is also expected tonight. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's visiting Israel, has called for the temporary ceasefire to be extended again. Irish singer-songwriter Shane MacGowan has died less than a month before his 66th birthday. As the frontman of the Pogues and later the Pogues, he introduced his own brand of Irish folk to a new generation in Britain. But he was also known for his lifestyle of excess, as our entertainment correspondent Colin Patterson reports. There was the raucous, rollicking music and the heavy use of drinking drugs, which in 1991 actually led to Shane MacGowan being sacked by his own band, the Pogues. His reply, "What took you so long?" He would rejoin a decade later. The Pogues also had huge international success. The actor Johnny Depp called him one of the most important poets of the 20th century. His best-known song has become a Christmas classic, Fairy Tale of New York, with Kirsty MacColl. There was Christmas Eve. That was our entertainment correspondent, Colin Passes.
Thank you, Alan. Now, there's been a certain unity today in response to the news that the former Chancellor, Alistair Darby, Lord Derby, has died at the age of 70. He was a New Labour politician and had a lot of jobs in Devon, Scotland, trade and industry, transport, work and pensions, and he had them because he was seen as one who did them well. The safest of safe hands, as Tony Blair described him today. And then, of course, under Gordon Brown, he was Chancellor at the very toughest of times. Banks were collapsing in the east. The hope was to there from southern Israel's Bedouin communities. They still haven't been. They were taken on the 2nd of October, along with their father Yusuf and older brother Hamza. Now, most of the captives are now being returned to Israel under the truce deal in the 7th day of that. But 4 haven't come. Aisha and Bilal, and the 2 young Bibas children, Ariel and Kid, who Hamas claim were killed in the airstrike while in captivity. Now, the mother of the 2 Bedouin detainees held in Gaza has told the BBC of her ordeal as she waits for their release. Our correspondent Anna Foster details.
In the south of Israel, a modest Bedouin town nestles in a Negev desert near the city of Rahat. Curious geese chatter in a leaves-block pen near small houses, washing neatly hung outside. The peace is deceptive. Now this is a place of anxiety, of waiting and tragedy, home to an extended family desperate for the return of one of their own, held hostage in Gaza. On the 7th of October, 16-year-old Aisha and her 18-year-old brother Bilal were taken, along with their older brother Hamza and father Yusuf. The men were working in a cowshed that morning. Aisha was only there because she'd gone to have a picnic with her father. I meet Naima Ziadna, Aisha and Bilal's mother, in her garden. The family's smallest children play around us as we speak, running over to see the microphone and clap hands. Their faces are bright and innocent, unaware of the grief that shadows Naima.
I am asking Hamas to bring back my children. Enough is enough. Every night I feel bad. I can't take this anymore. I'm losing my mind.
The deal that was struck between Israel and Hamas made provision for children, anyone under 19, to be freed. Almost 40 have been, but Aisha and Bilal still haven't come home. The ceasefire has been extended, but no one knows how long that might last.
Why does Hamas not set them free? Why does Israel not call for their release like it did with others? Aisha is 16, Bilal is 18, and Hamza is 22. Their father is diabetic and suffers from hypertension. He takes injections. Why were they not released? I can't live it. I am so tired of this tragedy.
Naima often had tears in her eyes as we talked, and you can hear in her voice as well the emotions, the fear and the anger, and I think most of all at the moment the desperation as she waits for her children to be released the way that the others have. Ali Ziadna, Aisha and Bilal's uncle, talks to me following afternoon prayers. As he holds a poster with photos of their faces on it, he has a clear message for those negotiating the releases.
The government always gives us the same answer, that it's all in the hands of Hamas. But no, you are the state. Insist. Should insist. We're not jealous of anyone. We're happy that they do return. May they all come back. But it can't be right that there are adults in the groups that we return, while a girl is left behind in captivity.
Another day of ceasefire has brought fresh hope to this family. They pray, as they have for 55 days now, that Aisha and Bilal, among the last child hostages in Gaza,
Catherine Ansell continues to explore our democratic future with a look at the future of security.
What can we do to prevent ourselves from careening into anarchy in one direction or into tyranny in the other?
The 2023 Week Lectures continue, now from Berlin.
Berlin's story, of course, is about a wall. That wall came down.
Next Wednesday morning at 9 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
It's up to us to prevent new walls from rising. Now, on PM, we're following the preparations being made for the two giant pandas, Wang and Tiantian, at Edinburgh Zoo, to return to China after 12 years in the UK. Kirsty MacDonald is one of their keepers who first saw them as a young business terrorist, but who now works with them, and she is giving us an audio diary of the panda's last days. And here's her second interview.
So Michael just started posting the show then, and young one has just woken up to get his apple tea again. As I mentioned yesterday, everything is all positive reinforcement that we do. So the fact that we are making slight changes to the family routine is very important for them to be gradual and make sure it's all positive news for them. That's why we're getting extra treats for getting up early in the morning and being slowly dropping it back earlier and earlier. And they've actually adapted to it a lot better than what we expected them to. They've adapted better to the yeah, they're happy with the progress we've made. We're also, obviously, the logistics of getting a panda on a plane is tricky, as you can imagine. So we're also doing training with travel kits that have been specially built for them. And basically, on the day, they will walk into their travel kit, and because that kit has been associated with nice treats, all good things will actually really like to be in there, so they'll be nice and comfortable and set for their journey ahead. So Yanguan is now fully awake and ready to go, so we're going to let him into his travel crate now. Good boy! So he's now walked into the crate and he's sat down. Good boy! Got himself nice and comfy and relaxed, and Michael's going to start cutting the slide whilst I'm giving him his favourite apple. Good boy. Good lad. And then Michael's going to open the slide again. Good boy. Oh, never. He turns out he stayed nice and relaxed, not bothered at all. Knows that it's good stuff, he's sitting and letting us do whatever around him, and he's not stressed, panicked or anything like that, which is what we want it to be like, so that one day he just flog on into the gate, shut the door behind him, and just won't open it again until we're in China.
I'm glad the pandas are not doing the audio diary, because we really don't seem to do very much after we sit around talking on that was Kirsty MacDonald audio diary to follow those pandas in their last days here. Now, it is 27 minutes to 6. We're listening to PM, and we'll have a summary of news from Alan Smith. The veteran Labour politician Alistair Darling, who was Chancellor during the global financial crisis in 2008, has died at the age of 70. The Prime Minister at the time, Gordon Brown, said he'd guided the Treasury and the UK through traumatic events. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has told the COVID inquiry that many, many lives would have been saved if the first lockdown had been imposed 3 weeks earlier than it was in late March 2020. RT defended the government's decision at the time, saying there was still enormous uncertainty at the start of that month. Hancock also suggested an unhealthy, toxic culture at the centre of government would undermine response to the coronavirus. Rail workers belonging to the RNT union have ended their long-running dispute with 14 train companies and accepted a pay deal. They'll receive a backdated rise of 5% for the financial year that ended in March. However, train drivers represented by the union HASLEF will carry on with their strikes. An agreement has been reached at the start of the UN's COP28 climate conference to help developing countries worst hit by natural disasters linked to global warming. The creation of the Loss and Damage Fund was greeted by cheers at the conference in Dubai. 2 more Israeli hostages held in Gaza have been released. Mia Shem, who's 21, was seized at a music festival. She was freed alongside another woman, Amit Susana, who's 40. Another group of captives who's due to be handed over later tonight. The Supreme Court in Russia has banned what it calls the International Public LGBT Movement, declaring it an extremist group. No such organisation exists. One LGBT campaigner describes the move as a new low point of insanity. And the talents and dissolute charisma of Shane MacGowan have been remembered after the death of the Pogues lead singer at the age of 65. Songs such as A Pair of Brown Eyes and A Rainy Night in Soho are the energy of punk and traditional attitudes.
Thanks, Dan. Now, COP28, the latest of the UN climate change conferences, has kicked off in Dubai. So the important context here, in which the discussions are occurring, is that the UN said today 2023 is set to be the hottest year in human history. The UN's World Meteorological Organization, in fact, said that this year is one that's shattering a whole host of climate records. Greenhouse gas levels are record high, global temperatures are record high, sea level rise is record high, Antarctic sea ice is record low. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, kicked off the meeting with a powerful message.
This year has seen communities around the world bothered by fires, floods, and searing temperatures. Record global heating should send shivers down the spines of world leaders, and it should trigger them to act. We have the roadmap to limit the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius and avoid the worst of climate chaos. But we need leaders to fire the starting gun at COP28 on a race to keep the 1.5 degree limit alive.
So what has happened? Justin Rolax, BBC's climate editor, he's in Dubai for the conference. Well, Justin, let's start with the news reported, which is a success really for the big reached an agreement on a fund. But looking at the detail of this climate fund to help countries adjust, the amounts going into it so far are so small, they're barely worth reporting. 100 million here, 10 million there. It's not very much.
$17.5 million from the Americans. I got the feeling they might have rummaged around at the back of the sofa in order to come up with that figure. But look, it is significant that for decades, actually, the developing world has said, look, the developed world needs to have some kind of fund to address the immediate effects of climate change that are wreaking damage on their countries, and that has now been delivered. I think it was quite a kind of clever PR stroke to open it in the opening day of COP. Normally this is more like a kind of Paris Council shuffling its paper and getting picked up in its papers and getting things in order, ready for the world leaders to arrive tomorrow. And it's quite striking to see a deal. This is a significant deal. The money isn't anywhere near enough. We need hundreds of billions, and we've got a few hundred million. But it is, we're through the COP, so it is the beginning of some progress in the right direction, and that has to be a good thing. And again, it kind of creates a really interesting tone at the beginning of the COP where there was a lot of skepticism. Not least in the story I reported about deals that the UAE might have been planning to make for oil during climate meetings, but also just because of petro stations at the time, which does sound like the beginning of a bad joke.
Well, look, talk us through what success looks like at COP28. What is it that is on the table that needs to be discussed apart from this issue?
Well, the central issue on the table is something like the global stock take, and that's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a great reckoning by the UN of the progress that countries are making on their promises, their undertakings to cut carbon emissions. We've got an integrated synthesis report. It says there has been some progress. We're bending the curve on future temperatures a bit, but not enough. So what's on the agenda is an attempt to tighten up or broaden, in fact, deepen the commitments that people make. So including, for example, food and agriculture aren't part of the carbon capital that companies make. They'd like to draw that in. They'd like to, if they can, introduce a bit of accountability. And that's one of the great things that really missing from this whole process. The UN can't force anybody to do anything, any countries to do anything. Everything's voluntary. So they'd like some kind of way of measuring whether countries are doing well enough. And at the very least, I think, to be able to call them out if they're not delivering on the promises they make. And then there are going to be other sort of fields where one of the big headline things will be a commitment to treble the capacity of renewables by 2030. That's quite significant. An attempt to double energy efficiency by 2030. They expect some more deals on finance. I think there might be something quite interesting on the language around the future of fossil fuels.
All right, Justin, thanks for that. Undoubtedly, we'll be talking to you again about events in Dubai at COP28. It is interesting to ask whether the 8 billion human beings on this planet can get their act together to connect the and deliver a plan of action to stop climate problems spinning completely out of control. Is it even no potential to that? Joining us now, Christiana Figueres, Costa Rican diplomat, woman who led international climate change negotiations through the last decade, through to the key Paris Agreement of 2015. And Christiana, it's really good to have you on the PM program. In papers today, you told reporters people must keep the outrage really high, but temper it with some optimism. Where are the grounds for optimism?
Well, there are lots of grounds, but first of all, I totally agree with Justin's points that he made about what we can expect. And in addition, there actually are quite a few very positive signs on the horizon, all of which can be summarized by the fact that while it continues to be important to have these multilateral agreements, for example, for the fund that he has mentioned, the fact is that the transformation of the global economy toward a decarbonized economy is now happening much faster, pushed by the economy itself, by the political economy, rather than by policy or multilateral agreements. It is definitely taking over from political agreements as the key driver of change. And let me just say the plummeting prices for clean solutions, including solar, wind, batteries, and EVs, they've just plummeted since the Paris Agreement, making them actually now increasingly the technology of choice. So we're seeing a radical change in both electricity generation moving over to renewables, as well as in light transport to begin with, moving later into heavier transport. But all of this is happening, and it is having a very important impact on the demand for oil and gas. OECD demand for oil and gas has already begun to decline, and in the world, you have oil and gas demand that has plateaued and will begin to decline over the next 2 to 3 years.
So interesting that you say that, and you're right. As one looks around, one does see a lot of, if you like, private momentum to getting decarbonising. Have we left it too late, though? I suppose is the question. Is this? I mean, 1.5 degrees, capping the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level. That seems almost impossible to achieve. I just wonder whether we're essentially going to be doing this just a little bit beyond the last point which we need to.
Yeah, is it too little, too late is a very good question. And it is, frankly, the most important question. So I'm very glad that we're giving space to this. I would say it would be too little, too late if the advances in these technologies, which are the technologies of the solution, were advancing on a linear level. But they're not linear. The advance is not linear. It is now exponential, which is categorically different than linear progress. And because it is exponential, and we already have vast evidence of the fact that it is exponential in solar generation of electricity, in wind generation, in EVs, in batteries, and there's just the tiny little beginning of exponential progress with respect to green hydrogen. So because it is exponential, that is the reason why we stand a chance, although no guarantee, that we may be able to make up for a last time.
Well, that is interesting. I can say you're co-founder of a group called Global Optimism, and you're giving us a little bit of that optimism because I think I detect that you think if you just tell people it's all a catastrophe,